There are encounters after which a person feels strangely emptied. Nothing terrible seemed to happen. It was just a conversation, ordinary contact. Yet afterward, the person feels a heaviness, a fatigue, as if something had quietly been drained out of them. They cannot put it into words, so most often they blame themselves. I must have slept badly. I must be tired. I'm just not in the mood. But time passes, and they notice a pattern. With certain people, this repeats again and again. Some leave them full, and others leave them wrung dry. Carl Gustav Jung understood this phenomenon more deeply than we tend to think. He knew that the human psyche is not a sealed vessel, but a field that interacts with the fields of others. And there are people who, often without realizing it, live off the energy of others. Not because they are villains, but because inside them there is an emptiness they never learn to fill on their own. And so they unconsciously draw fullness from those around them. Jung would say that whoever has not met their own darkness and gathered themselves from within is condemned to seek what is missing on the outside, in attention, in drama, in other people's strength. This video is about the signs of such people, about those who take energy rather than give it, not so we can learn to judge and label, but so a person can learn to recognize these patterns, both in others and, far more importantly and more difficult, in themselves. Because to understand this mechanism is to reclaim power over your own life force, which a person without noticing spends years handing out to those who are never satisfied. Sign 1. They feed on drama. Around such a person, everything turns into an endless storm. A small event is inflated into a catastrophe. Calm feels unbearable to them, and where there is no conflict, they unconsciously create one. Jung would say that drama, for such a person, is fuel. It fills their inner emptiness with strong sensations and draws to them the attention without which they feel they do not exist. But someone nearby pays for every such storm, with their peace, their strength, their clarity. A person leaves such contact as though they had survived a tempest, though outwardly nothing happened. Sign 2. They are always victims and never take responsibility. In their story of life, others are always to blame: parents, partners, bosses, fate, the times. They seem frozen in the role of the one whom the world treats unjustly, and this role gives them two advantages at once: the sympathy of others and freedom from all responsibility for their own life. Jung saw in this a refusal of what he considered the central task of an adult, to become the master of one's own destiny. The eternal victim does not grow. Instead of growing, they pull from those around them a rescue that no one can give them, because they can only save themselves, and that is precisely what they do not want. Sign 3. They criticize and devalue. Around such a person, everything good in you seems to dim. They will find a flaw in any joy, a shadow in any light, a reason for doubt in any of your achievements. Sometimes it sounds harsh, and sometimes it hides behind a mask of care. I'm only saying this for your own good. Jung would say that the one who constantly belittles others is most often fighting their own deeply hidden sense of inferiority. By devaluing another's light, they feel superior for a moment, but they buy that momentary height at the cost of another's energy. A person leaves them doubting themselves, while the other leaves slightly fuller. Sign 4. Everything revolves around them. In a conversation with such a person, there is no room for you. Any topic they gently or sharply return to themselves. Any story of yours they interrupt with their own. Any pain of yours they surpass with theirs. Greater still. To them, you are not a companion, but a mirror and an audience. Jung would connect this to an inflated yet fragile ego that needs constant confirmation of its own significance, because from within, it does not feel that significance. And that confirmation it takes from your attention, your time, your ability to listen, taking everything and giving back almost nothing. Let us picture a person who lives for years beside someone like this, perhaps a close relative or a partner. Outwardly, everything looks fine. They are together, they are close, they speak of love. But with each passing year, the first grows paler, quieter, more unsure of themselves. while the second seems to flourish at their expense. The first does not understand what is happening. They only feel that their life is somehow shrinking, that their dreams are going out one by one, that almost nothing remains of their former liveliness. They blame fatigue, age, circumstances, and only after a long time, sometimes only in a therapist's office, do they begin to see the pattern. Their strength did not vanish on its own. For years it flowed to the one who never learned to live on their own. Jung encountered such stories constantly and knew how hard they are to recognize from within, because the bond that drains you often goes by the name of love. Sign 5. They project their shadow onto you. This is one of the subtlest and most destructive mechanisms, and Jung described it more precisely than anyone. Everything a person rejects and refuses to acknowledge in themselves, their aggression, their dishonesty, their envy, they unconsciously attribute to others. And so the energy-draining person often accuses you of exactly what lives within them. They call you selfish while being consumed by themselves. They reproach you for coldness while being incapable of warmth. And the most insidious part is that these accusations disorient you. You begin to seriously doubt yourself, to justify yourself, to try on someone else's darkness, and enormous strength goes into that inner struggle. Sign 6. Their emptiness cannot be filled. However much a person gives to such a one, attention, help, love, time, it always turns out to be too little. Gratitude, if there is any, is fleeting, and by the next day the need flares up again, insatiable as before. Jung understood the nature of this bottomlessness. It lies in the fact that the person seeks on the outside what can only be found within. No amount of another's attention can fill the emptiness left by an unlived encounter with oneself. And so whoever tries to satisfy such a person with their own energy is like someone carrying water into a bottomless vessel. They exhaust themselves, and the vessel remains empty. Sign 7. Their envy is disguised as care. When something good happens to you, such a person does not truly rejoice, though they may say the right words. Behind their congratulation there is a chill. Behind their advice, a wish to cool your rise a little. Behind their concern for you, a secret displeasure that you are climbing higher. Jung saw envy as one of the most corrosive movements of the soul, a silent rejection of another's light. Whoever has not made peace with their own life cannot bear a blossoming nearby. And so, without admitting it, they strive to dim that blossoming. And a person who has shared a joy suddenly notices that their joy has faded, as if it had quietly been taken from them. Sign 8. They act through guilt and passive aggression. Such a person rarely speaks openly of their grievances. Instead, they punish with silence, with heavy sighs, with hints, with an offended tone that leaves you constantly feeling guilty of something without understanding what. Jung would say this is suppressed aggression that finds no honest outlet, and so seeps out through roundabout ways. And living beside it is incredibly exhausting. A person is always as if walking on thin ice, guessing at another's mood, apologizing for things they never did, giving their strength to hold together a fragile piece that the other deliberately keeps fragile. Let us also understand why, beside such people, a person does not leave at once, but often stays for years, giving their strength again and again. The reason is that energy-draining people rarely take openly. Between their demands flash moments of warmth, charm, remorse, just enough to keep the other on the hook of hope. The person remembers those bright flickers and believes that the real, good other is about to return, if only they endure a little longer, give a little more, try a little harder. Jung understood the power of that hope. And so it is so hard to break free of such a bond. A person holds on not to what is, but to the promise of what it seems could be. And while they cling to that promise, their strength keeps flowing into the abyss. Sign 9. They don't want a solution. They want an audience. Such a person can talk for hours about their troubles, but the moment you offer a real way out, they reject it at once. It won't work, it's impossible, you don't understand. Because in truth, they are not looking for a solution. They are looking for an endless listener, ready again and again to feed their complaint with their attention and their sympathy. Jung would say the person clings to their problem because it has become part of their identity, a way to receive love and attention without changing. And whoever sincerely tries to help discovers that their help is not needed. Only their energy is needed, which they pour into an abyss that yields no fruit. Sign 10. They pull you down when you grow. As long as a person stays in their old place, all is calm. But the moment they begin to change, to grow, to rise, the energy-draining person, often unconsciously, begins to resist. They mock the new aspirations, remind you of past failures, sow doubt, take offense that you have grown distant. Jung understood this. One person's growth disrupts the familiar balance in which the other felt comfortable. Whoever fed on your insecurity loses their source when you find strength. And so, without admitting it, they pull you back down toward the old version of you that was convenient for them. Before going further, it is worth pausing on the mechanism itself, on why one person is even able to feed on another's energy. Jung did not consider this mysticism in the cheap sense. He saw here a law of the soul. Every person carries a task, to become whole, to meet their darkness, to gather themselves from within and find the source of life within themselves. This is hard work, and many spend their whole lives fleeing it. But the energy needed for living is still required, and whoever does not draw it from within is forced to draw it from without. From this is born what people aptly call energy vampirism. A person with an unlived inner life instinctively reaches toward those who have that life in abundance and feeds on their warmth, their attention, their strength, because they have none of their own. This happens almost always unconsciously. Such a person weaves no cunning plans. They simply follow the need gaping within them, as one follows hunger. And so blaming them is as pointless as blaming the hungry for their hunger. But to let them feed on you to the point of full exhaustion is to betray your own life. That is why it is so important to distinguish compassion from self-sacrifice. Compassion sees another's pain and remains itself. Self-sacrifice dissolves into another's pain and loses itself. The first is maturity. The second, a trap into which the kindest, most sensitive people most often fall. Jung noticed a bitter pattern. Energy-draining people are especially drawn to those with a big heart and weak boundaries, those who cannot say no, who feel another's pain as their own, who consider it their duty to rescue. And so the work on one's own boundaries is, for a kind person, no less important than kindness. Without boundaries, kindness turns into a bottomless well from which everyone draws who does not want to dig their own. Look closely at these 10 signs, and their common root reveals itself. They all grow from one thing, from inner emptiness, from a person's unlived encounter with themselves. The one who takes energy is almost always the one who never learned to be a source for themselves. They are not a villain. Most often they are deeply unhappy and suffer from the same emptiness with which they torment others. Jung regarded such people without hatred, with clear understanding, and this understanding matters because it guards against 2 mistakes: the naivete in which a person endlessly gives themselves away, and the cruelty in which they begin to despise. The truth lies between them. One can understand and feel compassion, and still not allow oneself to be emptied. And here it is necessary to say the hardest thing. Before searching for these signs in others, an honest person is obliged to ask this of themselves. Am I not sometimes like this for someone? Do I not sometimes feed on another's drama, another's attention, another's strength? Do I not sometimes turn those close to me into an audience for my complaints? Do I not project onto them what I do not want to see in myself? Jung insisted that it is easiest to see in another precisely what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. And so this video is not a list of enemies to be identified and cast out, but above all, a mirror. Whoever is able to see the vampire in themselves and begin to fill their own emptiness from within ceases to be a funnel and takes the first step toward becoming a source. So how does a person protect their energy when someone nearby is taking it? Jung offered neither hatred nor flight nor a cold wall. He pointed to something more mature, to boundaries. A boundary does not mean cruelty. It means respect for oneself. A person can feel compassion for another's pain and still not drown in it. Can listen, but not let another's despair settle inside them. Can love and still not give themselves away entirely to one who will never be satisfied. The first step is simply to notice after whom they feel emptied and to stop calling it coincidence. The second is to reclaim the right not to be constantly available, not to justify their boundaries, not to rescue the one who does not want to be rescued. This is not selfishness. Jung would say that care for one's own soul is a duty, because whoever has allowed themselves to be emptied can no longer truly help anyone. It is worth speaking too of guilt, because it is guilt that most often keeps a person from setting a boundary. When a person says no for the first time, stops being constantly available, refuses to rescue the one who does not want to be rescued, they are almost always overcome by guilt. It seems to them they are acting cruelly, selfishly, that they are abandoning someone who needs them, and the energy-draining person, sensing this boundary, usually increases the pressure, with offense, with reproach, with the role of the abandoned victim, to return everything to how it was. Jung would say it is important to recognize this guilt for what it is, not the voice of conscience, but an old hook by which a person is dragged back. True conscience does not demand that a person destroy themselves for another. To allow oneself to feel that guilt without obeying it is one of the hardest and most freeing steps on the whole path. And there is one more step, the deepest, to reclaim your projections and stop feeding those of others. When a person accuses you of what lives within them, you can, for the first time, not take it upon yourself, not rush to justify yourself, but quietly ask, is this true about me, or is it their darkness which they are handing me to hold? And recognizing what belongs to another, return it to its owner without taking it for yourself. This is true protection. Not a wall of anger, but a clarity in which a person stops confusing themselves with what is imposed on them. Whoever has found that clarity becomes immune to manipulation, because they can no longer be disoriented about who they are. And then a quiet but profound change takes place. A person who has learned to guard their energy notices that the very circle of people around them shifts. Those who fed on their insecurity, their guilt, their eternal readiness to give, gradually drift away because they have nothing left to feed on. And others come in their place, those who do not take but share, who around them grow brighter, not dimmer. This is not cruelty and not a punishment for those who left. It is a simple law. When a person stops being a bottomless source for another's emptiness and becomes a source for themselves, those gather around them who are able to share fullness rather than drain it. It is worth speaking, too, of what happens within the soul of a person when they finally stop being a donor to another's emptiness. At first comes not joy, but a strange mixture of relief and guilt, and sometimes even sorrow. For the role of rescuer, however draining, gave the person a sense of being needed, of meaning, of significance. Having let it go, they are left for a time alone with the question they had been drowning out with others' troubles. Who am I, if I no longer rescue anyone? What is my own life filled with? Jung would say that it is precisely here, in this unfamiliar silence, that the real work begins. That very encounter with oneself which the person had so long put off by dissolving into others. And the energy that once flowed into another's abyss returns, for the first time, to its owner, and becomes available for their own growth, their own designs, their own life, lived at last. And then something is revealed that overturns the whole view of this subject. It turns out that the best defense against those who take energy is not a wall and not a struggle, but fullness. The one who is connected to their own source stops being convenient prey, not because they have bristled, but because there is no longer that breach in them through which strength leaked away. Emptiness attracts the one who seeks something to feed on. Fullness is calm and self-sufficient, and beside it the vampire simply has nothing to take. A person becomes like a spring of clear, constantly renewing water. They can share with those who come in goodwill and remain full, Because they are fed from the depths, not from another's hands. Because in the end, the point is not at all about learning to recognize enemies and defend oneself from the world. The point is to stop handing out your life force where it will never be valued or returned, and to learn to direct it toward your own life, your own growth, your own encounter with yourself. Whoever has filled their emptiness from within no longer fears energy vampires, not because they have vanished, but because there is nothing left in them to take. Their fullness is fed from a source to which the others have no access. And this is perhaps the quietest and most reliable form of strength, to be so connected with oneself that another's emptiness can no longer empty you. If this video resonated with you, if you recognized in it someone from your life, or perhaps yourself, write one word in the comments: boundary. Leave a like so this conversation finds those who need it now, and subscribe to the channel. Here we go into the depths, toward ourselves, following Carl Jung.